Hopefully everybody's managed to log on okay. So good morning. Thank you for joining our Pathfinder community event today, hosted by the Connected Places Catapult. My name is Amanda Hislop and I'm the project manager for the Pathfinder programme at the Catapult. As many of you will be aware, this is our second Pathfinder event being held as a webinar. So I think we've all got used to this way of working, especially as we find ourselves in another month of lockdown today. But hopefully next year we'll be back to meeting in person and have the opportunity to fully network again. In the meantime, today's event is being recorded and will be available via the Connected Places Catapult webpage as a YouTube link. To kick off, I'll take you through the agenda. So following the same format as previous community events, we will first hear updates from our Pathfinder Steering Committee members. So we have Greg Easter from the Department of Transport, Gordon Baker from BAYS, James Bell from the CAA, Konstantinos will be from CPC talking about the Pathfinder programme and also providing an update on the UTM programme. And then Andrew Chadwick will be telling us about the future of Air Mobility Innovation Centre. During these talks, please do submit any questions using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, stating who you wish to pose the question to, and we'll hold a short Q&A with the steering group panel at the end of this section. Following the Q&A, we'll then turn our focus to the industry presentations, and today we will be hearing from Simon Masters on the Future of Flight initiative. Ricky from Skyports will be telling us about their COVID-19 medical delivery. Ofcom are here today to discuss trial licenses and roadmaps, but please note this part of the presentation will not be recorded. We'll switch the recording back on again for Graham from RPAS, who will be talking to us about standards. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Lisa and Tris from BAYS, and they'll be telling us about their work in the Regulatory Horizons Council. So again, during these presentations, do submit your questions using the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and then we'll hold a short Q&A with all the presenters at the end. So after the webinar today, we will email you a link to the webpage, and you'll find the recording from today, as well as all the slides. So first of all, let's kick off. I'd like to hand over to Greg from DFT to open up. Thank you, Greg.
Good morning. Hopefully everyone can see and hear me. I can't see myself. Okay, I can now. Excellent. That's improved things, hopefully for you. So thank you everyone for coming. I think it's our second one of these community days we've had to unfortunately do remotely. So disappointing again that we are not in the room together, enjoying coffee, etc. from the Connected Places Catapult. However, still really good that I think we've got a really good turnout today. So thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully, I think I may have said this in June, but hopefully by the time of next meeting we can be doing it in person. I wasn't going to say very much this morning, given there's lots of really good content going on later in the morning. People who are out there trialing drones, doing really innovative stuff, which I think is the thing that a lot of people will want to hear about, and sort of connect with different people. So there are two areas I was going to just make some brief remarks on. One is on the drone Pathfinder itself, which is to say that I'm aware that during this year there has been a number of government-supported activities which have provided some funding, normally match funding with industry, to do some drone projects. We're hearing from Future Flight later this morning. Also the UK Space Agency have been doing some stuff in this area. So just for the sort of benefit of newer people in the community, just want to say briefly, the Pathfinder program is by design not set up as a competition like those programs. It seeks to bring in people who are doing innovative stuff with drones and bring them into the community, so they can share ideas with your fellow counterparts in industry, with government, with the regulator. So there is an application process, rightly or wrongly, that doesn't attract government funding for sort of carrying out of projects. So we are sort of looking for people who are sort of doing interesting things where we can add some value via the membership of the Pathfinder community. There is an application process. I think in the time I've been on the steering committee, all those who've wanted to get involved and that have had good ideas which can add value to the community have come in, so they have been onboarded as Pathfinders. So I would say that's most of the time a relatively light touch process in terms of considering sort of who formally joins as Pathfinder and who is sort of just within the wider community. So lots of guidance on the CPC's website for anyone who's interested, but I just wanted to sort of slightly set out the difference between the sort of funding competitions which have been run and the slightly more unique role that the Pathfinder program has at the moment. We are always looking for ways to improve and enhance the program. Obviously, government is in an interesting position at the moment in terms of our spending. Some of you may know we are, as government departments, yet to receive confirmation of budgets for the next financial year at the moment. So there's a limited amount I can say on things of that nature in this forum, but you know, any ideas people have for ways the programme could evolve or improve, I think myself and the other members of the steering board are very open to hearing those. The second and final thing I was just going to touch upon this morning was electronic conspicuity, which, if you don't know, is a strange form of words, but by conspicuity we mean sort of equipment that can provide some safety benefits in terms of helping pilots and drone operators identify other aircraft flying in their vicinity, as an enhancement to visual see and avoid. So DFT with the CAA have a month ago today, in fact, launched a grant scheme which is aimed at the general aviation community, but also open to parts of the UAS community, particularly those undertaking more complex operations in the sort of higher two bands of the incoming EASA drone categories. So the scheme is up and running at the moment for a time limited period within this financial year, but people who are eligible, who are looking to purchase EC equipment for on their aircraft, can, if they meet the criteria, claim a rebate of 50% up to £250 from the DFT and the CAA. So this would be better if I had a slide, but I can tell you it is genuinely quite easy to find the information on the CAA's website. If you just put in CAA and electronic conspicuity, the information should be quite easily found. So those are the two things I wanted to mention. I'm aware we have a really good lineup later this morning. I wanted to just say briefly, I think of particular interest, not taking away from others, will be the Regulatory Horizon Council team from our government colleagues in Bays, who are setting up what I think could be a really exciting project for this industry, and could be a good way of sort of drawing together some of the sort of regulatory strands that sort of sit within different organisations and different government departments. So, you know, amongst the whole of the agenda, I would sort of particularly recommend, I think, having listened to that and seeing if anyone can contribute. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Amanda. I think that was my spiel. Sorry, I should have said. So I'm now handing over to Gordon Baker from BASE.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, everybody. And that's also clever, Greg, to make a pitch for the very last session in the agenda as well. So you have to stay all the way through to enjoy that. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a couple of slides to share with you. Bear with me. And let's see, I think. And just want to give a little run through, you know, why is BASE involved in this, and what do I stroke my department, what do we do? Essentially, the role of BASE is, you know, supporting growth and productivity across the economy. But there's a number of roles in BASE. I mean, you just heard mention of the regulatory side. There's also funding science and R&D. A lot of work around energy, all the different sector teams as well. And this is a time of great transition and change and challenge and opportunity, I think, across society and across the economy. We've got a lot coming through with new technologies, but also challenges now around resilience, of course. Automation's a big push, net zero mobility. There's some big transitional changes coming through. Our team, you can see on the slide, our team's the Future Sectors team in BASE. Which is, you know, it's a great opportunity. Essentially, our role is to support business growth, but we've got this incredible challenge that we've decided to sort of focus in on robotics and autonomous systems, or smart machines, as we're increasingly calling them, that sit in this this interesting kind of bit in between, you know, the traditional, I guess, metal bashing robots of old that are still very important in manufacturing. And the new wizardry coming out of machine learning and increasing computer power and artificial intelligence. And what we're now seeing is increasing capabilities. I put some pictures up just to animate some of the range of these applications, as these physical robots can increasingly sense, reason, and adapt within their environments. And so drones are, in many ways, one of the sort of frontier, leading, sort of interesting use cases, almost a case study in this transition towards autonomy. But there's a whole complexity around it. And, you know, in government we have, I don't know if you've heard of the Office for Artificial Intelligence, the Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles. There's a Manufacturing Made Smarter program, all trying to essentially push the new technologies in these new sectors and understand what government's role is in enhancing that. And, you know, essentially creating a business environment where you guys can thrive and grow. We've yet to get an office for drones or a center for connected UAVs, but, you know, this sort of range of sector applications, I guess, that drones can play into across construction, agri-tech, healthcare, infrastructure, energy, a number of different zones, and the complexity around the regulatory, the airspace management, the aviation aerospace industry. Business support, technology support, you know, there's a complexity around this. So government has to actually be quite flexible to respond to that. We're trying to understand and support this transition. And I just wanted to point out, just a bit like Greg did, a couple of specific areas where there are opportunities, I guess, for you to particularly connect. The Trustworthy Autonomous Systems is a live program that you may or may not be able to connect into usefully for your work. It's essentially a research program, but there's a really important component there of essentially building the trust and safety, security, resilience of the systems that we're talking about, and the public having the confidence in those. So there's back in June, I think it was, the hub at Southampton University was announced, and just yesterday 6 new nodes of research. The details are up there on the screen. Where there'll be, you know, the UK is really trying to be, you know, take leadership globally in ensuring people have that confidence in these systems. Perhaps more applicable, but with a very short deadline for application, closing on the 20th of November, the Robotics for a More Resilient Future. Now, this is an extension that was recently announced to the Robots for a Safer World program. Drone organizations, drone providers have received funding under the program in the past. And I'd recommend you, if you haven't already seen it, jump in there to see what's available. Essentially, they're open to a wide range of technologies, including drones, with particular focus on delivering new resilience. That's essentially what I wanted to get out today. As Greg did, a range of inputs to come, and straight on now to James Bell from the CAA.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gordon, and good morning to everybody. Just bear with me while I bring up some slides. I'll give that a second to peter through the internet to everybody. So yes, thank you very much, Gordon, and good morning to everyone, and thanks for joining the event today. Again, it's great to have you all on board, despite the current situation. I'm James Bell, the Innovation Strategy Lead in the CAA's Innovation Hub. And today I'll be sharing some updates from the Innovation Hub, as well as a short update at the end on behalf of our UAS unit. Okay, so as a quick introduction for those who haven't seen us before, the Innovation Hub was first established in April 2019 as a way of supporting aviation innovation in the UK. And we are made up of three main services you can see there on the left. So the Gateway, which is there to provide a single focal point for innovation. The Sandbox, which provides the supportive environment for testing in partnership with the CAA. And then the third function there, the Regulab, which collates those learnings and research and insights on innovation topics in order to anticipate and respond to those innovation topics and the trends. So I recommend also keeping an eye on our latest guidance and thinking and news on the Sandbox activity at our website there in the bottom right-hand corner. So firstly, I'd like to do a quick update on the Sandbox. And so first, just to introduce, give perhaps a revision for some of the Sandbox methodology. And this is based on a typical innovation cycle. So the principle here is to progress innovation through lots of rapid cycles of planning, testing and learning. And this enables the testing of innovations in weeks and months rather than years that we might typically see, especially with the regulator involved. So in response to innovation trends, we also create the Sandboxes, so Sandbox challenges, Sandbox challenges. And these are meant to be focused on specific areas of interest, and are complementary to other initiatives in the UK, such as the Pathfinder. So in August 2019, we kicked off the BVLOS Sandbox with a particular focus on operating without segregated airspace. So clearly operating beyond visual line of sight in segregated airspace is a challenge enough, but removing the protection of that segregation brings additional challenges. So we currently have 6 participants in the BVLOS Sandbox, and 4 of which have recently had their test plans signed off and are now progressing into their testing phase. And so we should start to see the results of some of those during that testing during next year, during 2021. But even without testing, even up to this stage, we've already learned a lot together in this collaborative relationship. Whether that's the innovators learning how to better refine their concept of operations and their approaches to testing, or indeed internally within the CAA, learning more about these innovative proposals and the regulatory gaps that exist between what exists at the moment in our regulatory frameworks and the the innovative proposals that are coming forward. So unfortunately, due to resourcing over the next sort of 3 months, we're not looking to onboard any additional participants into the BVLOS Sandbox. However, we will continue to run what we call the pre-Sandbox activity. So if you are interested, please do still have a look at the challenge brief on the innovation website and do get in touch with us. But taking this brief period also allows us to better sort of refine the sandbox brief based on everything that we've learned so far. And we're also taking this opportunity to narrow the focus specifically to detect and avoid the detect and avoid ecosystem and solutions, as described in our BV loss guidance, CAP 1861, which was further refined and updated in CAP 1861A, which I'll come on to shortly, but there's a link there for anybody when they get the pack afterwards. But before I do, I just want to give a quick update as well on the Future Air Mobility Sandbox that was launched earlier this year. The initial call closed and we are expecting to announce the result of that shortly. However, the sandbox does remain open to proposals. So again, please do read the sandbox brief on the website. Again, there's a link there, CAP 1923, and do get in touch. So moving on to that third service, the Reg Lab, we'll do a quick update on what we've been up to. But first, I wanted to introduce this sort of Reg Lab methodology, just to describe how that function of the Innovation Hub sort of works. So you can see there on the left-hand side, the sandbox, which through the testing that it conducts and through that collaborative relationship with innovators, generates empirical evidence, which then feeds into our research work streams. And there's a list there of generic activities, regulatory gaps based on regulatory principles, risk analysis, gathering insight, those kind of activities that we conduct in our research work stream. And they enable the generation of hypotheses and assumptions, which feed back into the sandbox. So you can see a kind of cyclic relationship there between those two functions of the Innovation Hub. But it also enables us to generate some thought leadership through papers. So hopefully you've seen some of those over the last 18 months. Some external guidance, but also internal guidance. So providing our teams within the CAA with further evidence and thoughts and helping them to refine their policy and guidance. So I'd like to pull out particularly here our external guidance before I lead on to introducing the latest document, CAP 1861. And just to highlight here that the purpose of Innovation Hub publications, we call it guidance for innovators. And that's because it's above and beyond the existing CAA publications of policy and guidance, and adds that additional clarity and explanation based on what we've learned and what we're looking into in those specific innovation areas. Go on A. So this was specifically around detect and avoid for non-segregated BV loss. So as I said earlier, the sandbox, looking to refine that down to detect and avoid specifically, recognizing that, as I said, BV loss has lots of challenges anyway. The detect and avoid part to now enable that non-segregated BV loss is a real big challenge in itself. And so it's something that we felt was best to direct our relatively limited resources on to really try and help the industry and the regulator to crack that as much as possible. And so the aim of here was to bring kind of everyone up to the baseline understanding of what we mean by detect and avoid ecosystem and the solutions, etc., from which we can then progress together, like I say, in a kind of collaborative relationship. And so CAP 1861, as I say, specifically builds on the detect and avoid ecosystem. It is also defines what we refer to as detect and avoid solutions, and the distinction there, where a solution is based on the framework that is provided by the ecosystem. And on the right, we also like to pull out here that we expect, based on our engagement and research, that detect and avoid solutions are based on a combination of technologies and procedures, as you can see there on the right. So it might be that for a particular type of operation, only one of those is required. And if you can prove that that is safe enough, then that's the solution for that specific operation. However, I think in reality, it's going to be a combination of 2, 3, or 4 of those. And apologies for the rather blunt message here, but I'd like to pull out one particular point, is that currently there is no silver bullet solution to detect and avoid. And this is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but essentially, you know, it's something we'd like to drive home. It's just, again, that the composition of a detect and avoid solution is very much dependent on where you're operating, what you're doing, when you're doing it, who you're doing it with. And so I'll just let that message sort of sink in for a second before I move on. So the second element I wanted to just bring out here today is, again, it follows our principle of adding clarity. So none of this is particularly new. It's just articulating in a slightly different way to add that clarity, hopefully. And so here we try to visualize what the detect and avoid ecosystem is made up of and the necessary functions that, that are part of that. So with the left, it kind of progressed from left to right here, and on the left, got functions for the detection of potential hazards, and you can see those there. And the data and the information from those and from that detection needs to inform the pilot or the control system, from which a decision has to be made. And then that decision will lead to an action, as you can see on the right-hand side, in order to avoid and hopefully reduce the risk of that hazard. But critically here is the feedback loop at the bottom. We need to make sure that when an action is taken to avoid, it hasn't made the problem worse, or in fact stayed the same, or in fact the situation may have changed and there could be another hazard that has come into risk. So we like to have that feedback loop to make sure that that's a constant cycle of detect, inform, decide and avoid to reduce those risks. And then fundamentally behind all of that and backing all of that are the strategic mitigations, which are there, you know, to go across all of your operations. They're the agreements, they're the actions taken operationally that reduce the risk even further. And so coming on to our kind of engagement with the sandbox and trying to help innovators to better understand and describe what their solutions should look like and how they should describe those. We've introduced the evidence framework. And again, this is set out in CAP 1861A. And you can see there the detect and avoid ecosystem functions down the left-hand side. And this enables a much more rich, detailed and structured conversation between the innovators and the CAA. And so here we're looking for first, how is your intended solution going to operate in your concept of operations? So assuming you receive an approval and you start operating routinely. So that's the column there in sort of blue on the left-hand side. And then the purple, target performance. So for each detect and avoid function, we're asking you to set out what you feel you can achieve in terms of a level of target performance, excuse me, for safety. And then the testing column is then how you intend to reach that target performance and prove that your solution is safe enough. So you can understand, hopefully then, by providing all of this, this data in this format, enables a much more rich conversation with the CAA. And it's a living document that will sort of keep and maintain throughout your testing. So that's a very quick overview of CAP 1861A. You know, please feel free to look it up. There's our website, and you can see what else is available there. But before I finish and hand over back to the catapult, I'd like to do a quick update on behalf of the UAS unit. We've had lots going on recently. I think everybody will probably recognise the diagram there on the right-hand side. And so what they wanted to bring to attention here is clearly we've got some new UAS regulations on the horizon, which essentially has no changes to the basic principles of visual line of sight and BV loss. Come into applicability from the 31st of December this year. There was a summary provided in CAP 1789, which is being subsumed into a refreshed CAP 722 due early this month. In fact, imminently, I think. I'd also like to just cover on their behalf that there will also be some guidance within that refreshed CAP 722 for the carriage of dangerous goods. And we're doing a lot more work internally to better refine that guidance as well as we go. Obviously with COVID happening in the background, that's clearly quite topical. And then CAP 722 master glossary was published. That's CAP 722D or Delta. And the purpose behind that was really to pull out the glossaries that were spread across all these different parts of the CAP 722, and just to pull them into one place so that you've got a really easy reference there. Greg's already discussed the electronic conspicuity scheme. And then finally, CAP 722 Echo was published recently, providing guidance, initial guidance for visual line of sight swarm operations. Excellent. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to the catapult.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning, everyone. My name is Konstantinos Malmarakis, and I'm Senior System Engineering in Connected Place Catapult and Tech Lead of the Pathfinder and UTM programs. The CPC Pathfinder team is composed of our New Mobility Service Director, Henry Che, our project managers, Amanda Hislop and Rachel Capstick, and our Technology Initiative Manager, Andrew Chadwick. Recently, our team welcomed on board Howie Chow. Howie has background in intelligent transport systems and connected autonomous vehicles. In this program, Howie will undertake engagement with ongoing and potential Pathfinders. At this point, I would like to remind you the benefits of being a Pathfinder and the main criteria to become one. In high level, participating as a Pathfinder, you will have the opportunity to communicate your work, findings, learnings to DFT, CEA, and industry, while you will get the direct support by the steering group, namely DFT, CEA, BASE, and CPC, on areas such as the technical expertise, funding advice and assistance, enabling testing, collaboration and information sharing, regulatory guidance and support. A project ideally should fulfill the following main criteria to become a Pathfinder. Therefore, the applicants will have a funded project that conducts physical trials on BVLOS related and or one-to-many operation in the UK. The process to become a Pathfinder is illustrated in the diagram. So, in few words, what we like to the process to become is you request an application from CPC. You fill the application and send it back to CPC, and the steering committee will review and assess your application. Then you will be asked to present to the steering committee, and if you're successful, you become a Pathfinder. So far, we got 4 ongoing Pathfinders and 1 completed. The ongoing projects are the Energy Pathfinder, Above and Beyond, the Local BVLOS Control Environments Pathfinder, the MCA Drone Demonstration and Development Pathfinder, and the Unmanned Aircraft System to detect marine ingress near nuclear power stations Pathfinder. For more information on the above, please send us an email or visit our webpage. Next slide, please. So at this point, I would like to give you an update on the UTM project. The primary aim of this project is to work towards the initial operating capability of a UTM system for UK that will enable coordination among stakeholders, safe and efficient US operations, and multiple service providers operating in the same environment. Some of the objectives of the projects are to verify the set principles, requirements, and all agreed components of the open access UTM framework, such as areas like the UTM architecture, the services, the data exchange rules, and the data models. We also like to validate and provide the initial proof of concept of the open access UTM capabilities, demonstrate the end-to-end evaluation of remote pilot in a loop of traffic management, and transfer the knowledge and learnings and outputs to DFT, CEA, and industry. So far, we have defined the services, the comms and interoperability specifications. We have developed necessary software and systems. And now we are in the stage where we are integrating different UTM platforms and perform sprints and unit tests of all defined services. Our next step is to demonstrate the functionality and impact of open access UTM in a safe coordination and management of US traffic. We'll achieve that by conducting virtual trials and physical trials. The virtual trials will conduct cross-team simulations that include all developed services and scenarios, which include Pathfinder-related scenarios, emergency response scenarios, and of course the physical trials that we like to test. The physical demonstration now is planned for 2 days trials by end of March. The first day is mainly the shakedown required and the preparation, while the second day is going to be the demonstration day. I can now hand over to Andrew Chadwick, who will present to you the CPC Future Mobility Innovation Center. Thank you very much.
Konstantinos, thank you very much indeed. And hello to everybody. I hope you're all well out there. I'll just share my screen with you. So I hope you can see that. So I'd like to spend the next few minutes just talking to you about the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre. This is an initiative that Connected Places Catapult are launching today, and there's a few slides to go through that. So the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre, we're planning to be an independent centre of excellence for future air mobility and also associated specialisations in the UK. So our aim is to position the UK to be the forefront of future air mobility, also with unmanned aviation research and sustainable aviation. The Future Air Mobility Centre will be a digital platform which will launch in the new year, which will have access to system and also service demonstrations, and that as effectively as a shop window for UK PLC. It will also be a centre for R&D and also investment activity, and also provide a focus in the UK for investors and for funders. And the intention, as with a lot of the initiatives that we do within the Catapult, is to contribute to UK economic growth, but also help the industry develop safe, efficient and sustainable systems that will move goods and to move people. The Innovation Centre will be managed by the Connected Places Catapult, acting as our role as an independent convener for both industry, academia, investors and also government. And as I said, it's to support the safe integration of future air systems into communities. And we're doing this through a series of education pieces, communication and also promotion. And the intention is to promote UK capabilities not only with the public but also to local authorities, with government, to overseas investors, to the public buyers and also to regulators. Not just aviation regulators, but regulators right across the board, relevant to the ecosystem that we have in aviation. We'll be leading a number of collaborations with multiple stakeholders to overcome the challenges and barriers to the safe adoption of future air mobility and also to drone technology. So effectively very similar to the role that we have currently within the Drone Pathfinder program, but extending that to future air mobility and all the aspects to do with that. And the outcome being to incubate those ideas and turn them into demonstrations, physical demonstrations across the entire future air mobility, unmanned aviation and sustainable aviation ecosystem. And we'll also provide through the Innovation Centre a portal for public engagement, which will include public experience days. So the outputs, apologies, there's a long list because we have a lot of outputs, but it's to provide a networking and also showcasing opportunities. So the intent being to lead to an increased growth in UK businesses and the development and growth of UK SMEs. So we'll be doing that by brokering new collaborations and partnerships and creating that wider network of UK suppliers. We will provide UK businesses with the opportunities to access a new market, to customers and to funding, including opportunities to export their products and services. And it will provide a focused engagement with industry in the UK, particularly SMEs, for maximum benefit. As I mentioned, we'll be having industry events, networking, hopefully we'll be able to do that physically from next year, but also international missions and the like. And we'll be working with relevant government departments to enable that. And we'll be providing independent advice to government and also decision makers, which will include market insights and also looking at new business cases and commercial models. As you're aware, one of the roles of the Connected Places Catapult is to look at the business aspects of how we can develop new technologies and introduce those to the market. So that's one of the aims of the Innovation Centre, will be to do that very thing for future air mobility. That will be supported by a catalogue of UK capabilities and solutions. So we'll be coming back to you early in the new year for input to that. So we're hoping to put together a catalogue of UK capabilities in the future air mobility space. We'll be launching a number of technology and business accelerators and also initiating the development of new standards and regulations. That's both in aviation, but also future air mobility supporting infrastructure. So that will be the infrastructure, so the physical and also the digital infrastructure. We'll be identifying and enabling new CR&D projects and collaborations, and also providing access to regulatory support and advice. And again, that's not just the aviation regulatory support, but that's also regulatory support across the entire ecosystem itself. The initial activities is just a handful of those, just to give you a flavour of the type of things we have planned. So we're currently just finalising a future air mobility roadmap, which we're doing as an exercise looking at our own view of what future air mobility will look like in the next 20 years. And that we'll be sharing that by the end of this year. So we've been co-creating that with input from industry, from regulators and academia. We're launching the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre, so we're doing that now. And then early next year, once the platform is live, we'll be also launching a Pathfinder program centered around future air mobility. In Q2 of next year, we'll be launching an accelerator program, so very similar to those, for those organizations that know the work that we do in the Connected Places Catapult. We have a number of technology accelerator programs, particularly around the transportation side of things, and we're actually launching a funded program in Q2 of next year. At the end of next year, we'll be planning to have our first Future Air Mobility Summit, where those accelerator programs will be presenting the work they've done. We'll also be presenting the work we would have achieved next year. And then interesting, in the beginning of 2022, we have planned to perform a major market demand study for future air mobility. So this will be a 4 to 5 month study looking at the entire ecosystem of future air mobility, looking at the demand for that market, and giving a guidance for industry, government of investment opportunities. And then finally, we have planned in the end of 2022, a second Future Air Mobility Summit, where we'll be presenting the market demand study, plus all the outputs from the work we would have been doing in 2022. So there's a lot of work that we're planning to do in the next couple of years, and there's other things between that as well. So the key resources and stakeholders, it's being hosted, as I mentioned, and staffed by the Connected Places Catapult, and we will have access to equipment, which we'll be looking out to industry to provide, so models, example simulations, equipments, the like, and provide demonstrations which could be performed at company-specific locations and facilities, or at test facilities and sites, or we could host those live on the digital platform. And we'll be holding meetings, promotional work, events, and also managing the catalogue of UK capabilities and database. In support of the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre, and also for our other programmes of work that we're planning within the Aviation Directorate, we're actually now recruiting. And so we're looking to increase and boost the team that we have to cover the work for the Innovation Centre, to cover the increased work we'll be doing on the Pathfinder programme from next year, plus our work on sustainable aviation, and of course the Future Flight Challenge and our other CR&D programmes that we're launching shortly. So we are now recruiting, and details of that is available on our website if you're interested in looking there. Also of interest, we are creating a new Air Mobility Directorate, which will focus all our air mobility work for the Connected Places Catapult going forward. I'd like to thank the support of our stakeholders that we've initially engaged with, and there's a list of them there, ranging from government to industry bodies and to societies, and also the number of companies that so far have shown their agreement and support to the work we're promoting to do in the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre. So that's it from me. So the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre, the intent is to provide a shop window for UK PLC and the capabilities that we have, with a view to developing that business and developing a safe, integrated future air mobility ecosystem. My contact details are there. Please do feel free to give me an email, and I'm happy to share more information with you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm handing back now to Amanda for your questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Right, we have had a few questions in during the steering group panel presentations. So first of all, I think I'll go back to Andrew. I've got one here for the CPC. Is the CPC able to support early stage startups as well as large incumbents? So the smaller businesses might be more innovative and maybe more ambitious, but they don't have as much resource and may need more help going forward.
Yes, is the answer to that question. We may not be able to provide you with funding, but we can provide you with access to support, both at business and also introductions to potential investors and also other stakeholders that may be interested in the products and technologies you're developing. So our role in the Castle is to help develop all sizes and shapes of companies. So we are here to help you as best we possibly can, but we can't guarantee you any funding. But we can help make those introductions and provide help and advice on your business and how you could operate. So yes.
From my end, just replying to that message. So I am uploading now the platform, the SME team platform that we have as well. And so I have also a link there where you can get registered, and the SME team will contact you and provide some support, and it will help you to grow, if that's okay.
Thank you. You're putting that into the chat, Konstantinos, yeah?
Yep, yep.
Great, super. Thank you. I've got one here for Greg. So one for you, Greg. So why did the DFT choose to include Flowman Pilot Aware for electronic conspicuity funding? There was an understanding that maybe the strategy was for devices in protected spectrums.
Morning. Hi, Mark. So we, I don't think I will mention specific companies. However, there are a range of different devices using different systems at the moment. We don't feel at the moment, sort of jointly with the CA, we're in a position to finalise any longer term future strategy. However, in the interim, we're very keen to support voluntary adoption of equipment that could support increased conspicuity and therefore our attention being safety. So I would say that there is very much an onus on people applying into the scheme to talk to the manufacturers, look at the guidance that is out there to establish what the best conspicuity solution is for their particular type of flying and the airspace they're intending to fly in. This is in some ways, in some parts of the sector, quite a contentious issue. I think I saw on one of the GA publications the other day, I think nearing 100 pages of discussion on this very topic of the difference between different manufacturers' products. I'm afraid I didn't read all of them, but our position at the moment is certainly to support the overall market and enable pilots to choose the equipment they consider will best support their flying.
Okay. Great, thank you, Greg. James, a couple of questions for the CAA. Back to you.
Yeah, I think there's a.
So,
go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the major challenges being faced is understanding how to overcome the detect and avoid challenge. So when can we expect to get a regulatory standard minimum operating performance information for DAA? The current ones are great for larger systems, but not feasible for the smaller UAVs.
Yeah, and great question. And clearly having, and I mentioned target performance as part of that evidence framework that we've introduced in the latest CAP. And I think I described how we're asking innovators that come forward into the sandbox to show us what they think they can achieve. And so the work that we're doing through the sandbox is there to explore what is achievable, what are, in terms of industry's capability to prove the safety of their systems, etc. And as I say, it's always very collaborative through the sandbox. And so on the CEA side, we're doing some research on what should the, I guess, target level of safety be for detect and avoid And so kind of in a combined way, hopefully the two will come together at some point in the future. I'd hate to say when. We've tried to be very optimistic about detect and avoid, and clearly the BVLOS sandbox has been open for some time now. But the more we're finding is that this challenge is I think again with our participants in the sandbox, we're finding this challenge is really, really difficult. Actually trying to get to that point where we've got detect and avoid solutions that are safe enough. As I say, lots of really good work going on. We're moving now into the testing phase, and hopefully that will generate lots of evidence that we can use to learn and build on. And so I think it will also be very much dependent on, as I say, the solution, the operating environment, the aircraft that you're using, the system that you're using, what's around you, etc. I think this kind of builds on Mark's question about the silver bullet for DAA, and so we'll hopefully see that there will be solutions that are recognised and perhaps even approved for specific pockets of types of operation first, and then I guess in my mind, as we described in the original CAP 1861 back in November last year, internally our reg lab activity, if you like, in that research stream is to pull all of those together in terms of what has worked, what hasn't worked, even down to test plans that have been signed off, and so we can gather all of that evidence together into a sort of a matrix across different operational types, just to really build that evidence base. And I think that's the key, is the evidence we need there. And we're in discussions with NEAs in other countries as well, to kind of share experiences and see what they're doing as well. So lots of good efforts going on. I'd hate to put a date on it. I don't think anybody can, but we can be optimistic and progressive and see where we get to. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you, James. We do have another one here for you around the silver bullet for detect and avoid. So is there at least a common approach, standardized scenarios emerging to those four detect and avoid elements? If not, it implies that maybe every BVLOS operator has to solve the BVLOS safety case uniquely every time. Is that the case?
I think, like I've sort of tried to touch on just then, at the moment, yes. Every operation is different, largely. I mean, clearly there's going to be similarities between some, but certainly categories or types of operation, there's so many factors involved, as I'm sure a lot of you will appreciate. Some operation types might look the same on a high level, but actually there could be elements in there that make them quite different. So I think at this stage, it will be a case of unique solutions per operation, perhaps, or per type of operation. But again, as that evidence base builds up, as industry start to understand what works and what doesn't work, we should start to see building on those industry standards as well. And again, so looking to organisations such as EUROCAE and those in the US that are working on industry standards for detect and avoid solutions. We are keeping an eye on those. We're involved in sort of keeping in touch with those. And so again, it's a big collaborative effort. But certainly at this stage, yes, I think it'll be unique, but we're heading towards, it would be, the intention to head towards sort of more standardized approaches.
I think that is all for you today, James. Back to Connected Places Catapult. Probably one back for Andrew, actually. In your presentation, you showed some industry stakeholders that the CPC have engaged with so far on your roadmap development. Have you been engaging with any operators at all?
I think that comment was more regarding the Future Air Mobility Innovation Centre, where we have engaged with a lot of industry partners of varying shapes and sizes. On the roadmap itself, it has been shared with programs such as the Future Flight Challenge and with the Regulatory Horizons Council, but it is really a Connected Places Catapult view on future air mobility and the roadmap for the next 20 years. So So we've taken inputs from projects which are currently ongoing and planned projects, not just in the UK, but globally, to inform that. But it is being provided as a Connected Places Castport's viewpoint on the next 20 years of future air mobility. But we welcome feedback once it's been released.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Konstantinos, one for you. So just reflecting on James's no silver bullet for detect and avoid, what are the sector Pathfinder conclusions from, for example, the energy Pathfinder on a common way on how BV loss can be resolved?
Yeah, I think it's more or less on the same line with what James said before. So in order to standardize some of these operations, it's key to identify and overcome some of the technical, operational, and commercial barriers. So by identifying these, we can maximize the understanding of the what is needed in order to standardize this operation. So there could be some areas where we have, overlapping areas or common areas that can pass across different operations, but we have to identify some specific areas. For example, in that energy Pathfinder, there's some specific challenges that we would need to capture and overcome in order to standardize them. So I don't know if this answers that question, but the conclusion is that there's a need for assessment first of each service, and then try to transfer this knowledge to other Pathfinders as well, or other BV loss projects.
Okay, thank you, Konstantinos. There have been plenty of other questions actually, which have been answered through the chat. So do feel free to scroll through some of those. There's some links as well that have been provided from Gordon, from the UKRI, Trustworthy Autonomous Systems web link, and some other questions also answered. So do go and have a look at those. So I think that's the end of our first section. We will move on now to our industry presenters, and I'd like to pass you straight on to Simon for the future flight.
Thank you, Amanda. Sorry, I'm just getting my slides ready. I haven't anticipated the quick changeover there, so just get my slides up in front of me. Okay, there we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Simon Masters. I'm the Deputy Director for the UKRI Future Flight Challenge. Very delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you this morning, and I will be giving an update on where we are with the Future Flight programme. So as a bit of a reminder for anyone who has not come across us before, or at least not recently, so the Future Flight Challenge is looking at the future of aviation, predominantly in three areas, looking at drones and looking at urban air mobility, or in the other terms it's now commonly known by, and looking at electric propulsion, and at this stage electric propulsion for those platforms I've mentioned, but also for sort of sub-regional short-range aircraft. And really what we're trying to achieve is a sort of an aviation system of systems approach. As you can see, perhaps on the roof, this pillared diagram in front of you. And what we're really keen to do is to create that overarching system. What we don't want to do is just to fund a lot of exciting but discrete technologies. We really want to find a way to bring things together. So integrated with things like regulation. So we're working very closely with James and his colleagues at CAA, looking at infrastructure, looking at energy, and all of the other bits and pieces that really need to come together to make EV vehicles a sort of usable concept in the future. And that's a bit of a departure from us, from our sort of traditional way of working. But we are very excited to be doing that, to be working with the Connected Places Castport, amongst others, to really build those links outside of the sort of traditional aerospace sector. I'll give you a second just to digest any other elements of this rather busy slide, but hopefully this gives an overview really of the sorts of areas that we're looking at overall in the programme. So this is very much a programme in 3 phases, and perhaps to correct any misunderstandings we may have shown in the past when presenting the slide. So we very much see this as 3 phases rather than 3 rounds of funding. And as we go on to talk about our recent phase 2 funding competition, we are not saying is there will only be 3 rounds of funding necessarily. We're trying to take a flexible approach, and clearly in these interesting economic times, I think it's certainly benefits to be as flexible as possible when we consider how we will invest the remaining funding that we have over the next 4 years. But this slide gives you a broad outline of what we're trying to do. Someone more clever than me, or clearly a chemical engineer perhaps, has come up with this concept of really coalescing different technologies together. So as we get toward the right hand side, where we're looking at a fully integrated demonstration of multiple vehicle classes in hopefully, if James and colleagues at CAA will permit, in live airspace, and we're looking at in around about the middle of 2024. So this is our roadmap. This is where we're trying to get to, and everything else that I'll talk about from now on will be some of the bricks, some of the steps we're taking towards achieving that vision. So in terms of an update on where we are, so over the summer we ran our phase 2 competition. This was for collaborative research and development projects with a pot of up to £30 million. And we also looked at the tremendous interest we were receiving from the drones community and also from the government as part of the COVID-19 pandemic response. And we were able to put together an additional funding line to fund projects for companies who saw how the use of drones could be used to support the government, the emergency services, the NHS, in supporting those pandemic responses. And so we ran an additional competition just for drones to do that. All of these, the timescales sort of neatly overlap. So we've now made the decisions of which projects we will fund. We are working with those companies to get them towards the start, accepting there are some painful but necessary elements of financial due diligence that we have to carry out, which is standard for the use of public monies, and is taking perhaps a little longer than we had originally hoped. Positive news is we're getting through that. I can't say too much more about the specific projects we're funding and the facts and figures today. We are expecting an announcement, a formal announcement by the government and in the press next week. And so I have been told, under pain of all sorts of punishments, that I cannot share too much today in case I preempt anything that may be announced in due course. What I can say was we had a very strong and positive response. It was really encouraging that during these hard economic times, a lot of organisations went to the trouble of putting together projects, and very strong consortiums were formed and covered a huge range of different technologies, different elements of the programme, and indeed covered a great coverage of the country. So with projects from all across Scotland, North of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Southwest. So really a really great coverage. If I was able to share the sort of geo-map, you can see we have achieved quite a success in that sense. So that was a real positive for us. Obviously the funding only goes so far, so weren't able to fund everyone, but we hope there are some really successful projects that will come from this and that we will be hearing about soon. And I guess specific to this community, actually quite a high percentage of the projects funded were actually drones projects. So that's a real great reflection of the work of the drones community and really the interest that there has been in this competition. So moving on from that, and I guess with the objective to present what we do, not just in terms of the raw funding of projects. So there's some other activities we're doing which really help to build us towards our ambition for this sort of system of systems approach. The first one is looking at a safety case. Safety, of course, is paramount in aerospace and aviation. and our research has shown that there was perhaps an opportunity to contribute towards the thinking on safety, both at a sort of overarching aviation systems level and also looking at some of the other vehicles, be they drones or urban air mobility vehicles, in a bit more detail. So we're working with some experts in these areas to try and build something and build sort of a report as an initial step, really to help us understand some of the issues that we may need to be aware of, but also to kind of stimulate that discussion across the industry, and even for those who are not in the industry at the moment who may feel they want to contribute to that, and really, as the last bullet point says, keeping the UK kind of in its place as the one of the kind of thought leaders globally in terms of aviation safety. The next thing we're doing is looking at sort of socio-economics. So we've been working with some organisations, PwC being one of them, to try and look at what are some of the economic benefits. We know that there are, if you get out Google, you can see any number of eye-watering numbers in terms of the GVA contribution for some of these new technologies, and we really wanted to get our own sort of view and a view that is aligned with the specific technologies that we're looking at in the future flight program. With what we don't want to do is to overstate or potentially understate the value of the work that we're doing, the value to the UK economy in the future. So we're hoping to have an initial report on that out quite soon, and really to try and understand what the benefits could be, and some of the social implications and challenges, and indeed the opportunities. And again, it seems that the opportunities, we're only sort of looking at the tip of the iceberg at the moment. We are contacted regularly with people with ideas of how to use drones, how to use novel flying vehicles for any number of business or market opportunities that perhaps haven't been thought of before. And so there's a massive opportunity, and we're just trying to really sort of understand that and look at how we can best represent that internally to government. So if the time comes for us to ask for more money, then we can have a good and informative view as to the types of benefits, and really hopefully justify further funding into this area. The third one of these is on public engagement, and with apologies, there's a lot of words on the slide, but to summarise, my colleague Carissa Khan is doing a fantastic job in looking into how do we look at the public engagement, the public readiness aspects of the future flight technologies. There's a working group chaired by Gillian McBride at Strathclyde University who is starting to look at this, and we're working with colleagues in ESRC as well, really to pull together their social science experience and expertise, and looking at what are some of the aspects we would need to address, or at least be aware of. Some of this crosses over into the regulatory side as well. Are there any limitations on the widespread adoption of drones for deliveries for any other purposes, and what do we need to take into account in terms of risk, in terms of noise, in terms of all of these sorts of things, which if we leave unchecked, untested at this stage, it may well cause us some issues in the future. This is a slide I think one of my colleagues presented, which in turn borrows from the Royal Aeronautical Society. It's a tweet they sent out, and this is actually concerned with urban air mobility specifically rather than drones. I thought this was quite interesting as a way of gauging public opinion quite quickly in a slightly crude way. But if you see the question there, would you be comfortable flying in an automated eVTOL aircraft? Then the predominant answer was no. So as one very small and perhaps crude example, there is clearly some public perception challenges that we face in order to allow manufacturers and operators of these types of vehicles, and indeed drones, to actually get them up and running and into sort of widespread usage. And some of these, I won't go through all of these, but some of the approaches we have are around looking at building public trust, I say looking at safety, legal and insurance issues, and all this sort of thing. And I guess the complexity for us, many of us are sort of engineers from the sort of more traditional aerospace industry. This is very new territory for us. This is not an area we're expert in. And let's say that's why we're very grateful for our colleagues in academia and ESRC in helping us to sort of navigate this new area. just a few more bullets on that, but I understand you'll receive a copy of these slides, so I won't go through all of those now. And the final one is we're looking at road mapping. So again, my colleague Carissa is putting together a plan and a framework to create a roadmap. There's a number of workshops that will be run over the coming 3 months, which some of you may be invited to, and forgive me, I'm not entirely sure who has been invited to those yet. But really, we're trying to gather knowledge in the key areas, identify what the gaps are from what we're doing, bring some insights into the programme. We have a vision as to what we want to achieve from this programme, but we know that the world changes around us very quickly. And so we do want to engage with experts in the field to understand whether we're still heading in the right direction or whether we need to change anything, and see what the opinions are, what the future may hold. And that may well, say, help us to change how we look to run our subsequent competitions and how we look at what offers the best value for the public money that we have. I think this was my final slide. I may have omitted previously at one point, which I'll sort of add in now at the end. One of the things we have found, and particularly in working with a lot of the drone companies that we're working with, there's actually a tremendous amount of interest in the use of drones. And we are in sort of early discussions with a lot of other government departments, the MOD, for example, and increasingly the NHS on behalf of the Department for Health and Social Care. There is a huge appetite to understand how drones can be used for the pandemic response and for any number of other applications which have become perhaps more relevant or more at the forefront of people's thinking. So this is a sort of a fantastic for us. It's hopefully fantastic for the drones community that this level of interest seems to be building, not just within UKRI or BAYS, but actually across other government departments, and hopefully that will continue and will sort of help us in our sort of quest to try and push these technologies forward and support the drones community in doing this great work. Okay, so that was the end of my presentation, and I'm now going to hand over to Ricky from Skyports.
Thank you, Simon. I should just share my screen with you all. Perfect. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ricky Bagava. I am a Regulatory and Policy Associate for Skyports. Today I'll be talking about our trial drone service taking place in Western Scotland, supporting the NHS in their COVID-19 response. The project is planned to consist of 3 phases, and we are currently about to embark on phase 2. As mentioned, we're working with the NHS to introduce a permanent medical drone delivery operation in the UK, and we have a clear roadmap to do this. Phase 1 concluded this year in July and was a 2-week proof of concept demonstrating the viability and feasibility of a drone delivery service. Non-dangerous goods delivery took place between the Isle of Mull and Oban. We're currently about to embark on phase 2, pending some outstanding approvals, where we plan to extend the network in phase 1 and additionally deliver dangerous goods. This phase is planned to be 3 months in duration. Pending the outcomes of phase 2, we would hope to agree a more permanent service in the latter part of 2021. We're currently working with the CAA in their sandbox environment to enable future permanent operations outside of segregated airspace. So at the end of phase 1, we completed approximately 40 BV loss hospital-to-hospital flights, covering a total of 805 kilometers. Non-dangerous goods, including medical equipment, COVID-19 testing kits, and dummy pathology for temperature tracking data, were transported. To facilitate this proof of concept, we created 2 adjacent temporary danger areas via the airspace change process. We also had a temporary operating instruction to deconflict with the local emergency services and regular charter operators, whereby they could gain access to our TDA at short notice. By operating at both hospitals, engagement and public acceptance worked really well. We had over 200 people dropping by to see the drone, and it also showed other trusts, NHS trusts, the potential of our operation. Looking at the regulatory process, we worked with the CAA, Airspace Regulation, Innovation and UAV teams, and that worked very well. Given the urgency of the trial, the airspace team helped to expedite the temporary airspace change process. The innovation team helped to simplify our engagement with the CAA and navigate through the regulatory challenges we faced. And the UAV team, given the urgency of the project, turned around documentation reviews and approvals very quickly. We learned that front-loading the ACP process with informal engagement helped to save time later on. Understanding all airspace user experiences and needs when airspace is active is crucial and invaluable to enabling future operations in the area. We'd also like to work closer with Ofcom and share our data and findings on the effects of LTE on the mobile networks, as there is currently a lack of permanent solutions to support LTE control for BVLOS operations beyond the trial and demonstration, which could potentially hinder industry growth and, in this case, healthcare benefits. I'll now show a time-lapse video from the Isle of Obentu Mole. Looking forward to our European Space Agency part-funded project, which we're about to embark on. We will expand the route network established in phase 1 to support more hospitals and plan to carry in this trial dangerous goods, including pathology samples for COVID-19 testing, on top of the original payload we did previously. Should the trial be successful, we would hope to establish more permanent operations towards the latter part of next year. To do this, we see 4 potential routes with increasing complexity from left to right there. Route 1 involves what's currently being done, the use of temporary danger area like airspace, which is good for short-term solutions, but is not a viable long-term solution. Route 2 involves the use of potentially a transponder mandatory zone in low-level Class G airspace, approximately less than 500 feet. This solution would require a basic unmanned traffic management environment, electronic conspicuity, ground coverage, and an organisation to take responsibility for the deconfliction. We do see this as the best medium-term solution for permanent operations. Route 3 involves the use of onboard detect and avoid systems, which could consist of an onboard visual sensor information fused with electronic conspicuity information to give 360-degree awareness. And Route 4, which is a bit more of a complex solution, could take the form of a fully integrated UTM system, whereby the UTM system is integrated with the autopilot of a drone and can send commands directly to the drone to ensure deconfliction. This is the most complex solution, and it will require many, many regulatory approvals, and we don't envisage that to be around for the next 12 months. Our key learnings. So the CAA provided really great support throughout. We found that early informal engagement in the airspace change process will better help to understand airspace user needs and save time later on. As just mentioned, a transponder mandatory zone could be a good interim solution until a path forward is decided upon to facilitate BV loss operations in non-segregated airspace, as mentioned, either through detect and avoid systems and or a UTM system. The current dangerous goods and AOC application process are designed for manned aircraft. We need to scale both these approval processes proportionately for drones. And I'm very happy to hear from James earlier today that the CAA are looking into this. As mentioned, we'd also like to work much closer with Ofcom to help understand the effects of LTE on the mobile network and provide data required to go beyond the trial and demonstration license. Early stakeholder engagement is really crucial to help mitigate risks and avoid delays later on, as well as close liaison with the emergency services, as they do have primacy in most areas, and liaising closely with them to develop a robust temporary operating instruction can facilitate approvals. Thank you for listening. I shall now hand you over.
Morning, everybody. Can everybody see, can you guys see the presentation if I can get it into full mode? Okay, I'm going to go through this fairly fast and expect any questions if there's anything that you don't follow. This is a project that RPAS, the UK Drone Trade Association, has done with BSI. And the project was set out to research the view of standards and standards-like activity. And that includes things like best practice guides. And, you know, we were primarily looking at the UK, although we did get some overseas interaction. And we were looking at trying to identify duplication of effort, looking for gaps in the standards environment, and looking for barriers to drone adoption that could be alleviated with the creation of standards. This is a separate activity to the ongoing BSI ACE-20 unmanned aircraft systems committees and subcommittees. So we weren't focusing on that activity, but what we were focusing on is more to come. Now, a couple of points. We also identified fairly early on that there were some significantly funded projects. I mean, the AW Drones projects identified 650 so far drone standards. And we, you know, that's going to form a backdrop to some of the gaps and what's available. We weren't replicating that. And then people like ANSI have just published their version 2 of the standards roadmap for unmanned systems. So a lot of work on standards, but this was taking a slightly different tack. Before I move on, from the simple definition, standards are guidelines that companies can choose. They sometimes turn them into policies, and regulation and legislation is the legal requirement. So that was, and we were looking for whether people thought that regulation or legislation was needed as opposed to standards. The current status is we have had a survey, just over 300 survey responses. We closed it at the end of October. By comparison, the ANSI roadmap survey, as of this week, they've had 73. So, you know, that just tells us how hard it is to get people to respond to surveys. And in addition, we've interviewed over 40 people. And, you know, what I would say, once you see the next couple of slides, if anyone has any observation, comments, or what have you, please contact me. So the initial sort of findings were number of projects. I've covered that really, analyzing standards. The big problem is they don't use a common unified framework. So the glossary of terms is different, and that's one of the things we're highlighting back to BSI. There is some end user confusion between regulation and standards and understanding the difference between them. There's a perceived, I note, lack of clarity around what people are calling the new EASA regulations that will come into effect from the 1st of January. and there is apparent divergence between the US and Europe on some technical standards, and and hopefully those get resolved. But one particular one was a slight difference on conspicuity and potential duplication of standards and best practice within industry groups. We are aware of industry groups that cover the same industries or areas within the same industry have overlapping best practice guides. And last but not least, for some of the industry groupings, the CAA regulation is outdoor use, and a lot of people are actually using drones indoors as well. So we sort of came up with a model, which is that the regulations, CAA regulations, are in the dark blue down here. Aviation standards, the 650 standards, are in the light blue. But then there are other groups, which is the industry-specific standards, which relate to an industry or a group of industries, and the multiple green boxes here are sort of representing a number of those industry groupings, like construction, oil and gas, surveillance, and CCTV. But then there's a very important group that sometimes get overlooked, and you've just heard from one of them, the enabling standards group, which includes things like health and safety, security and cyber security, surveillance and CCTV, communications, 4G, 5G, do you need an Ofcom license, training including specific role training, privacy, legal and contracts, insurance, data, the list goes on. And those things are really got to be taken into account if you're looking at using drones in specific industries, is the sort of preliminary conclusion. And that led us to say that, okay, what we have is we have some cross-cutting, these enabling standards that cut across a number of industries. But if you're looking at a particular industry, then you need the end-to-end use case and all of the standards and all of the regulation to be covered in that particular use case if you're in the industry, so that you understand the commitments and the processes you need to follow. So that's sort of the overview of the project. The results, we're analysing those results, and perhaps at a future at a future session we can sort of go through those results with you. But that's it from me, unless you have any questions.
Thanks, Graham. We'll do questions at the end.
Okay, at the end. Yeah, so I'm going to hand over now to Lisa from Bays.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to be starting off this presentation. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tristan Bishop, and I work with Lisa Day in the Regulatory Horizons Council team. We're just going to put up our slides. But what we're hoping to do today is just to introduce you to who we are and our UAS exam question that we've just chosen to focus on. So yeah, Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Lisa Day and I work with Tris on unmanned aircraft as a priority area in the Regulatory Horizons Council. Perfect, thank you, Lisa. Next slide, please. So many of you probably be thinking, what is the Regulatory Horizons Council? You might have heard us speak before at the Drones Industry Action Group, which we're very thankful for the opportunity to present at. We're a recently formed expert committee made up of a chair and 5 council members with kind of cross-cutting expertise, supported by a team of civil servants, of which Lisa and myself are 2. And we report directly to the Bays Secretary of State with recommendations on regulatory reform needed to kind of support the emerging innovations in a fast and safe way. And the government kind of has a mandate to respond to our recommendations. So the Regulatory Horizons Council kind of emerged from a series of developments, including a recommendation originally from the Council on Science and Technology for regulators to have a horizon scanning
function, which then emerged in the white paper on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was published last year, into the formation of the RHC. And the kind of challenge that we're trying to deal with is trying to make sure that regulatory systems can adapt and keep up with new products and services. And yeah, there's a real sense that we need to make our regulatory systems more agile in order to seize the opportunities that are ahead of us. And we see the Council as having a critical role in enabling the UK to maximise the value from technological innovation across social, environmental and economic domains. And our kind of core objective is to identify the implications of technological innovation and advise government on the reform needed to support its rapid and safe introduction. So this kind of recommendations could include adaptations or the repeal of regulation or the adoption of alternatives like voluntary standards or accompanying guidance. And we're very much in the type of anticipatory regulatory mindset, trying to make sure that regulation is, where it can be, future-proofs and resilient to kind of uncertainty in fast-moving markets. So that's kind of the top-level summary of what we are. We've been formed in full since August. If we could have the next slide, please. This is just a brief summary of who our council members are. The two council members working on this unmanned aerial systems work are in the top right there, Matt Ridley, and just in the top in the middle, Dr. Parag Vyas. So we've got two council leads with the rest of the council bringing their critical faculties to bear. Next slide, please. So the kind of four initial priority areas that the RHC chose at their inaugural meeting back in August were the four you can see on the slide there. So we're a relatively small team. I think we're about sort of 8 to 10 FTE on the civil servant side, working on these four areas. We're sort of working on them for roughly 6 months. I think if it was to run a bit further, that wouldn't be an issue. And there may be subsequent tranches of work within these, or it could be that we switch onto something else. Slide, please. And we very much kind of see ourselves as developing recommendations in a participatory way, working with the communities of experts and practice that already exist in these different areas. And so we'll use a variety of different means to achieve that. When it comes to unmanned aerial systems, we've chosen our exam question with council members yesterday. Lisa will touch a bit more on the specifics of how we got there, but we're still kind of yet to decide our approach. So I think I'll probably hand over to Lisa there to introduce our selected exam question. Lisa.
Thank you, Tris. Okay, so what have we done so far in this area? So we started off with a long list of potential exam questions to look into in unmanned aircraft, including drones. And this was based on a lot of stakeholder engagement we did, and also desk-based research on what the regulatory issues or barriers were in this area that weren't enabling innovation as such. We conducted a series of meetings with internal stakeholders, including our council leads that Trish just spoke about before, and key policy teams across government and also regulation. And we did this to kind of develop those exam questions further. We then iterated these from the feedback from stakeholders. We then presented at the Drones Industry Action Group a couple of weeks ago, so you might have heard of us already then, and we invited kind of fresh perspectives from industry on this kind of long list of potential questions. And from that as well, we invited people to meet with us. So we had a series of multiple bilateral meetings with industry stakeholders too, just to get their views on which questions they think are the most urgent, the ones that we could deliver by March 2021, where we could add the most value, where there wasn't maybe a lot of duplication of already current work in that area. So that was really valuable input, and that allowed us to actually narrow down this very long list of questions to kind of one working exam question at the moment. And as Trish just said, we've decided that basically yesterday with our council leads. So it was really valuable getting some really great kind of feedback on these questions, and that's really helped us to get to this point now. So as you can see, we're really keen on using this participatory approach and including a broad range of stakeholders, not just internal but also external, to really help us to even define, I suppose, the scope of our project from the very beginning and obviously throughout now as well. So this is our working exam question for the time being at the moment. So we're wanting to look at or examine how to optimise aviation regulation for unmanned aircraft in order to safely enable and also shape the development of innovations over the next 10 years. And we'd like to do this by kind of looking at preferred futures. So what is the preferred future that we want to aim to, and possibly what are the steps we need to take now in order to get there. And we can really see maybe involving the public perception on this as well. And we would like to take kind of particular attention to operational safety case. So that obviously includes extended visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight, and also autonomous flying, so where there's no pilot. We might also look at airworthiness and certification, licensing, and also airspace management. So those are kind of a few sort of sub questions, I suppose, to the main question. So that's where we've got to now with our question. And obviously when we're looking into this, we'll need to think about the trade-offs of regulation in this sector as well. So next steps. So we need to come up with an approach to answering this working exam question and how we're actually going to reach our recommendations by March 2021. And we'd also like to invite you to complete a survey to hear your opinions and your perspectives on what the priorities are within, I suppose, the parameters of this exam question, what you would like to see changed, and where you think we could potentially add the most value. And I think Amanda has very kindly offered to, from Pathfinder, to send out a link to that survey within the next couple of weeks. And we'd also like to invite you to express your interest if you'd like to be involved in one of our future workshops on this exam question in order to come up for recommendations. So contact us if you'd like to be involved, or if you'd like to just tell us about your perspectives with the emails below. And I think I hand over back to Amanda now.
That's good. That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. Right, last round of questions, and we've got a few that have come in this last section. So I think I'm going to go back up the list. Back to Steve. Is there a timeline for allocation of spectrum to drones? Included in your presentation.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I may not have put that exactly there, but the European work that's ongoing in both looking at the mobile networks and also at the other spectrum, it is not likely to complete for about another year or so. So if on the mobile network side, it looks, if we get to the point where it looks like it's okay, and we hope it will do, but we don't know yet, then something like the latter half of next year, so maybe in 1 year's time, we will be able to do that. Similarly, for the non-mobile network spectrum, it's probably best handled at the European level, and there is work actively ongoing in that in Europe, as I said in the CPT. Unfortunately, that does have a fairly long timescale as well, because it's difficult to do things on a European basis very quickly. So that would probably be more or less the same time, I'm afraid. So probably about another year away.
another one for you, Steve. Has Ofcom developed a special process or guidance for the counter-drone technology?
If it's okay with everybody, I'd like to pass that across to my colleague Paul Chapman, who I think is better placed to answer this one.
Hi, good morning. My name is Paul Chapman. I head up the authorization policy at Ofcom. Steve's in my team. When we talk about counter-drone technology, there are two aspects of this. There's the detection, so radar systems to detect drones, and then there's countermeasures, which normally involves jamming. In terms of jamming, Ofcom does not and will not authorize any use of jamming equipment. Regarding the Wireless Telegraphy Act, but the use of that equipment is illegal. Now, the Crown and security services do have different rules, so they may be able to engage in those. And for certain types of jammers, for example, in prisons, government has brought in legislation that allows prisons to jam mobile phone signals. But in terms of jamming full stop, that won't be permitted by Ofcom. And if we do find that organisations that are not licensed to do so carrying out that activity, then we could enforce against them. Regarding drone detection systems, we haven't published anything on our website because, as I say, there are a number of systems being trialled at the moment, and we've been working with the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure, CPNI, regarding some of this, because a lot of these devices are offshoots of military equipment, and therefore we need to speak to MOD regarding allowing use in the UK. A number of systems have been deployed at airports due to the issue that happened over Christmas, so we are able to authorize devices, but because of the ad hoc nature of the various different technologies available, we haven't put anything specific out in terms of guidance. But that's in regards to detection of using certain radar systems. But when it comes to countermeasures such as jamming, Ofcom cannot authorize that use. I hope that answers the question.
There is another one coming your way, or for one of your team. Can you advise if it might be possible for a company to get commercial permission to use 4G for aerial C2 in 2021 for really restricted use cases? So I think John's given us an example here. A very restricted use case might be flights restricted to predefined locations, or flights restricted to less than 30 meters high using standard user equipment.
I'll try and answer that. I think the answer is probably not, unfortunately, because licenses that we issue have to be open and fair. Introducing a very limited set of users such as this would kind of go against that. It's almost like, you know, once the door is open, we have to let anybody walk through it who wants to walk through it. So allowing one by one, it's difficult to do that in a licensed product that we would have to develop, and we would have to go out to consultation if we were to allow use on mobile networks anyway. So this kind of consideration could be stirred into that, but I suspect that we would have to allow, or it'd be very difficult for us to introduce this kind of restricted use. I think might not be impossible, but it's something we'd have to look at very, very closely, but I suspect it would be very difficult to do.
Right, I think I've got a couple of questions for Simon. Future flight. So Simon, ESNOR is currently considered in future flight programs, funded future projects in phase 2. So noise could be argued to be a significant issue for public acceptance and therefore wide adoption of those technologies.
Yes, okay, so There are a couple of these projects that do consider noise as part of their objectives, and I think one of the things we're going to look at is if there is sufficient coverage in the projects we funded, then that's great to look at noise. If there's not, then we might choose to sort of make a specific piece of work ourselves, or to fund something directly to look at noise. Recognizing, as the question states, it's important. It might be that we fund something specifically to look into that, but we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, thank you, Simon. There's another one here, I think, for you. The NHS is proving hard to get in touch with the right people. They've engaged with the KTN with no luck so far. So can you directly help Simon with those people concerned from the NHS who you've spoken to and want that solution?
Yes, we can certainly try. We've spoken to a number of different people in the NHS, so it's probably just a question of passing on the right name. But I'll certainly look at that, and I think it's Alex has asked that question, so I can respond to him directly.
Thank you very much. I think I've got one back at for Gordon at Bayes on the new trustworthy autonomous systems link. So very interesting link. But it all seems lockdown is affecting those institutions. So how do external people participate, or are there any funds available to participate?
It's not a direct funding scheme that I know. I think the key is to contact the individuals who have got that support. They're named on the new individuals leading the different institutions, or leading the different programs within the institutions, are all on that website. I'd say just try to get in contact with them directly. I mean, their contact details are on their university websites. The principal piece that is up and running, the central hub, I think it may be a good start point too. I mean, the nodes have only just got announced yesterday. I'd say go to Southampton and contact the lead there. Again, the information's all on the website. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. And again, I think there were quite a few other questions which have all been answered directly. So again, we'll take a snapshot of the questions, put them up on the website with the answers for you all to see at, later on next week. So that is the end of our Pathfinder event today. So I just want to thank all the speakers for joining us today and sharing all their interesting presentations. I think there's been plenty of contacts shared as well across the chat forum, which is great. But if you didn't catch any of the contacts, or need somebody else's contact details, please email us. So there's an email address there on the screen, which is drones@cp.catapult.org.uk. So once again, thanks very much everyone for attending today, and I hope you will see you next time. Thank you.